Hello everyone, Molton here. Welcome back to another game in our series. This time we have gotten the move pawn to f4. I used to play f4 sometimes when I knew my opponent would play e5 just to trick them back into a king's gambit, but I don't particularly want to go into a king's gambit here if that's my opponent's intention. So we won't play a From's gambit, but a From's gambit is usually pretty good at especially lower levels of play. Instead, we're going to play this setup against the birds, which is very, very rare. We're going to play the move pawn to d5, pawn to g6. This is a good setup to play against this opening. The birds is really just the Dutch defense, but with colors reversed. So he's actually gone for f4, e3, d4. So this is the Stonewall setup. And generally in the Stonewall, I will go for c5, and I'll play one of two setups. I'll try to either trade off these light squared bishops to try and get an open file there for my rook and try to attack later on along it, or I will play some position where I trade off these light squared bishops. In this case, this is probably what I'm going to try and aim for. So I can play the move knight to c6 here, just wondering whether he can take this pawn on c5. I don't think he can. Most of the time he can't. I mean, usually you get compensation like pawn takes, and you can sort of ignore it and try to play e5 even later on and try to get compensation that way. But I might just take it just so he doesn't have that option. And he took back with the c pawn, which is quite surprising. I think it's probably better to take it back with the e pawn usually, because leaving himself with this sort of pawn structure I don't think is that great. So the serious downside of the Stonewall is that he seriously weakens his light squares. So any plan where you're looking to trade off these light squared bishops is generally quite good for you. I really wanted to play knight h6, that was the whole plan, but he sort of forced me into playing knight f6. Okay, we'll castle the king. Usually white will play this move knight to e5. Yeah, this is... So it does exactly what I was about to mention. I think this is the most dangerous try for white in this opening. Now if we capture the knight, I think white will just capture back with the f-pawn, which is a little bit annoying. Because then if we capture the bishop, I think white has this in-between capture here. I also don't really want to lose this light squared bishop if I can help it. But maybe we can't do anything about it. So okay, I'll defend the knight with the move rook to c8. It's a bit unfortunate that we are probably going to lose this light squared bishop. He doesn't take it. Can we save it with bishop to f5? We might get hit with the move pawn to g4 then. I really just want to trade off a couple of pieces here. Yeah, play a6, chase this bishop away. Okay, bishop goes back to d3. Okay, can we play knight to b4 here and chase this bishop away again? And maybe bring our bishop into the f5 square? Possibly. This knight is really annoying, and this is the problem when facing the Stonewall. We shouldn't have allowed this knight to get to e5, because now it's very hard to dislodge. There is this plan of playing bishop f5 and just giving ourselves this sort of double pawns. Let's go for this one. So, similar to a Caro-Kann, in some positions you can allow this sort of doubling of the pawns, and this gives you the open g-file and some attacking options later on. So we'll go for this. Also, trading the light squared bishops off is generally helpful for black. So follow through of the move pawn to e6, and then we need to find a way to get rid of this knight. It's very, very unpleasant. Opponent's trying to play for g4, I think. But we'll play e6, g4. Probably have to take that. Or knight e7 and capture here. Maybe go knight e7. This knight is very annoying, but you need to sort of play around it, because if you ever capture the knight, it can get quite bad for you. So if I go here, he might just take it. This bishop is getting outside the pawn chain as well. I don't really want this bishop to come out to b4, because that's by far white's worst piece. So if I allow the bishop to get outside the pawn chain, that solves pretty much all of white's problems. That's why I didn't want to go knight e4. Knight e4 takes, then the bishop comes out to b4. Okay, this makes a lot of sense, the way white is playing it. I need to challenge these pawns, so I need to go f6, I think. If I don't challenge these pawns, white will just start pushing up the board. Takes. If knight a4, looking to bring the piece in here, I probably have to play queen b5. Actually, I also had rook c2 now that the queen has moved. Okay. Should we trade queens? If we trade queens, it's going to be virtually impossible to try and win this. But if we don't trade queens, it could get pretty bad. Why don't we trade queens? So it's not ideal, the position we have reached. We need to maneuver this knight into the game as well, somehow. I'm thinking maybe knight c8, knight d6, knight e4. Seems a bit slow, but it's probably our best option. So I go rook here, preparing to bring the knight back. Okay, we need to move the king because he's threatening to take here. Yeah, this is very unpleasant. Starting to look very unpleasant. G6 is a problem. Not really, actually. G6 is not a problem. H6 is not a problem either because our bishop only has one square or two squares, but it is okay. Now, the problem is we can't move our knight. If I move our knight, the G6 pawn will get pushed up. Also, we're running seriously low on time. I sort of want to take it. If I push b5, I mean, if I push b5, he's probably just going to play a3. Doesn't help me that much. At the moment, he can't really make progress on the king side. I'm just going to wait for his king side attack to happen because he can't play g6, I don't think, because I just take it. And I don't think h6 is really a threat, so all my pieces cover the king side at the moment. h6, I just played the bishop back to f8. It should be okay. Like pawn takes, king takes. Should be okay, I think. I don't think he has any tactics with g6. It looks a bit scary though, but I think it's okay. g6, I go knight takes. If rook takes, I take. Pawn push, I go king g7. And I'm just in time. The good thing is that I do have this square now on g6 for my knight, so once I play knight g6, I sort of stabilize this kingside attack. It's going to be much harder for him to break through. Okay, so I think I'll take here first, just to force him to take back with the pawn. I mean, he could take back with the rook, but then he has to worry about the h6 pawn constantly, so I figured he'll take back like this, and this gives me a nice blockade now on g6, so the attack is a little bit less dangerous. I can play bishop to d6, I can play b4 and rook c2. I think it's time that we generate some counterplay now. We've just been defending for most of this game. So we'll bring the rook into c2 and then we'll bring the bishop into d6. And yeah, we're getting a lot of counterplay now, which is good. Okay, bring the bishop to d6. I don't see anything immediately, so we'll just improve our position first with a5. Maybe we have e5 coming. Maybe this is a move. Because here we're threatening e4 to push our pawn, and if he goes pawn takes, knight takes, he's walking into a lot of discovered checks. So maybe we could have played that last move as well. Would have been quite nice, I think. But okay, we advanced our pawn up the board, so this can only be good. I think we have knight h5 and knight f3 as a possibility as well. Let's do that. That's a really nice square for the knight. And now we can bring our king in to blockade the pawn on g6. Actually, we have to watch out for this move. But I think we have rook takes now. So g6 we take, and then pawn push I don't think works because we have checks along the back rank. So his idea is that if we go here, then he wants to go rook takes pawn. But I think we can just take, we can go check first. And then I think we can take with the bishop. Because if he queens, then we can just move the bishop. And then we get the skewer. Promoted to a knight. King g7. Is there a forced mate here? I think so. I just move my bishop back. Check. I think I can check here. Then check here. Okay, so our opponent played very, very well that game. So another option against f4, if you guys want to play, especially at the lower levels, this works quite well. You can play e5, pawn takes, and sacrifice a pawn with the move pawn to d6. And we call this the from gambit, where we sacrifice the pawn and we're threatening the move queen h4, which would win on the spot. For example, knight c3, queen h4, and here you can sacrifice your queen. Because you can, and get a nice checkmate. And if they go knight f3, then you can play the move pawn to g5, and it's meant to be quite okay for white if they know what they're doing, but especially at the lower levels this can work really, really well. But usually I suggest to move pawn to d5. After move knight here, g6, pawn to e3. So usually they'll play the move pawn to g3 and fianchetto the bishop, and then it leads into more of a Dutch type of position. Whereas here they played the move pawn to e3. I actually realized I made a mistake here. I probably shouldn't have played bishop to g7. Mistake in terms of I wanted to get a certain setup against the Stonewall, which it was something like this. So this is what I usually aim to get against the Stonewall, where I capture and then play bishop f5, because you saw in the game my bishop was already on g7, so I would have preferred something like this, and then played pawn to e6, bishop d6, and then castle my king to the queen side, where I can use this sort of g file to attack with. In the game I realized I overcommitted my bishop to g7, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with this move, it's just I wasn't intending to play this line, so I got stuck in this position instead. Captures, and this is fine for black. I mean, I just play knight f6 and castles. Maybe knight c6 was a bit early as well. I probably should have waited knight c6 because it just opens up to the pin on the knight. Whereas if I go here first and castle is probably a better move order. Knight c6 here, bishop d7. Yeah, I sort of got my pieces stuck in the game. because I allowed knight to e5 and then I could never take because captures with the f pawn and white opens up the king side. So I got into a very passive setup here as black. Of course my position is still fine. So we still went for this bishop f5 to try and get the counterplay going, but he actually attacked us and we never managed to get an attack going. So we were just defending most of this game. 97. Yeah, I was a bit worried about takes, knight a4, and the knight jumping into these squares, also the bishop coming out to b4. I probably would have had to play queen b5 to prevent bishop b4, but no, I think it looks okay for white. It's a little bit easier to play, in fact. But after h4, okay, f6, would like my opponent to take here and get this type of position, or bishop takes. And then we get this open file, I can shuffle the king across. And I think black is doing fine here. But he avoided this. I'm not sure if queen e8 was necessary, but I thought the queen was quite dangerous. And here I thought, at least optically, it looks quite good for white, but I mean the engine is also agreeing that it's probably nothing. It's just equal. The problem for white is that if he ever pushes the pawn, then we just capture. He has to take back the pawn, and he can actually make progress here on the king side very easily. Because even if I say put my king on g8, he has to constantly defend this pawn, and there's no way to really bring the rooks into the game. No easy way to do so. And the position is quite close still, but maybe he should have gone for this anyway, because it's quite annoying to deal with this pawn on g6. So maybe he should still go for it. He went for h6. I think this is probably the big mistake, because now I can sort of blockade the pawns and it's not as effective. Knight g6. Yeah, once I blockade the pawn and get my rook into the game on c2, then black's position is pretty nice. I think I can just play e5 here straight away, threatening e4. If takes, the problem is the king has no good squares to go to, and every square walks into either a discovered check or a knight fork. So these ones walk into the bishop, and this one walks straight into the knight check on d3, which would pick up the bishop on c1. So I probably should have played e5 right away as well, but nevertheless this is still winning. And of course we get 2 pieces for the rook, which is nice. So here we want to be a little bit careful, because if we played the move king across, I think white's idea is to go rook takes, which actually still doesn't work because we still have this check, but I wanted to avoid it anyway, because if we take the pawn, they take the bishop. This was the main idea, but yeah, it still doesn't work because we can just take the rook. But anyway, I checked, bishop takes, and yeah, you can't queen because I moved the bishop and pick up the queen. And yeah, now it's winning for black. So I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.